Immediacy really is the therapist's way of investigating or being curious about what's going on in the relationship. So immediacy is where you may be working with a client and something comes up within you, maybe a good feeling, it may be something that is maybe bothering you, and you just voice it. And there's a difference, and I want to say this right at the beginning, between being judgmental and being curious about what's going on. So I'll give you an example. I work with a lot of female clients, predominantly have a lot of female clients, and certainly what's going on in the wider world that's being reported, and the Me Too movements and this type of thing. I'm very thoughtful about how women may, engage with a male therapist. So, if someone is speaking about something that can be really intimate, I might just say, I wonder how it feels to speak to a man about that. And as a way of bridging the humanity between myself and the client. And it can also be a time where you really kind of question contradictions. So it might be that a client says one thing and then 5 minutes later says something else. And counselling is about helping the client be as honest with themselves as they can. So it might be, I gave an example of off air to Ken, where you might get a client who says, well, I've not used drugs for ages and ages. And then they say in the next 5 minutes, I used something on Friday. And, an immediate reaction was, well, you said that you hadn't used for a little while, but actually you said that you had on Friday. And it's about bringing a sense of reality, I think. It can be revealing how I am as a counsellor, what the feeling is in me, sharing a hunch maybe, or sharing something that's going on. And I think most crucially, what's going on between myself and the client. So it's very possible sometimes there might be a disconnection between myself and the client. And, we can't have elephants in rooms in therapy. We can't have things that are unsaid, I don't think. So sometimes it's, if it may be that a client is, if we use the analogy of clients who may have used some drugs maybe and said they hadn't, it may be that there's some shame going on for clients. That we work with shame a lot, and sometimes it's useful to say, I wonder what's going on. It might be the client becomes quite defensive with you, and sometimes you say, I wonder what's going on. It's something I've done. Always keeping the dialogue open. Keeping the channel of communication open and uncluttered, I think is immediacy, to be honest.
I like that. And immediacy for me, and my understanding, looking at what Carl Rogers speaks about immediacy as being, to be honest, it's a little vague in how it's described, immediacy.
Well, Roger's vague.
Wherever, there you go, there's my immediacy. Wherever you look to immediacy for a rock-solid definition, because it is something that comes up within the counsellor. So it's interesting because it is slightly stepping out of frame of reference. So we spoke about empathy in the head of this program of being within 100% within the client's frame of reference, only seeing it from their perspective. So anything we would feed back would be from their frame of reference. Immediacy is when you share a little bit of you. You bring something that bubbles up within you. And sometimes it can feel inappropriate. It might feel, I can't put this over. You may even have felt that in sessions in your placement before, where the client may say something or something's happening in the room and something comes up. It's almost like an overwhelming feeling. You want to tell them something or show them something, and you think, ooh, this is risky. And yes, it is. Immediacy can be risky. And Rory, you spoke so well about the stages of counselling, and immediacy would be inappropriate in session 1. You might put some gentle challenge there, but you would be less likely to put immediacy in a relationship that hadn't developed some form of trust, because it can fracture the relationship. And if you have a trusting relationship to underpin that, then immediacy, if you get it wrong, because you can go wrong with immediacy, you don't know whether you're going to get it right.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I can remember a colleague of mine, sadly not with us anymore, and she she started the first session with a client many years ago, and the client got a mobile phone out, dialed her husband, and said, "Can you speak? Can you speak to my husband?" And my colleague, she was called Colette, said, "Why don't you switch your phone off and let's just have a conversation about that?" And that's immediacy. Immediacy, you usually see it comes up around boundary issues. You know, where people may be pushing the boundaries, and a therapist has to be immediate. They have to say what's in them. And I'd point you to Rogers. Rogers, I was laughing earlier saying Rogers vague. Some of the things he said were a bit vague, I think. But if I can say that. He said, and I can't remember where the quote was from, he said, "I don't have to be consistent. I just have to be the thoughts and feelings that are present with me at any given time."
Yes. Oh, I love that.
That's immediacy. That's the core of it, I think.
It is. And I guess we use it. It's an advanced skill, and you kind of preface this by putting in that this is an advanced skill, and it's an advanced skill for a very good reason. You need to have some experience under your belt to know when it is appropriate to use immediacy. It is to be used gently, I guess, or with care, or with wisdom, maybe is a way of saying that, with wisdom. And so an example of immediacy for me, and I'd used this very same example in my book, Basic Counselling Skills, a Student's Guide, when I wrote about immediacy. And it is the example of being in a session and the client is bringing some material. And we're going to make this a male client just for this experiment. The client is bringing some material. And as the therapist, you're looking at the client bringing this, and you just get this overwhelming feeling of the client being like a little vulnerable boy as he's sharing this information. Immediacy is going with it and saying, you know, as you said that, it was almost like it was coming from a small, vulnerable boy. That's immediacy, because it's not based in anything the client may have said or not said. It's based in a hunch, a feeling, something that happened within you as the therapist. It's from your frame of reference. It's that almost spiritual feeling, very difficult to define. And there's two ways that can go. The client could reply and go, "Oh, you know what? That's exactly how it is. You really get me," and it can deepen that relationship. Or they can look at you quizzically and like, I don't know what you're talking about. That is the risk of immediacy. And if you have the trust and the developed relationship, you're able to say, no, it doesn't. It feels like I got that wrong. How was that for you? And you can go back into their frame of reference.
Yeah. And I think the wisdom that you speak of, Ken, is that of understanding how the relationship is, how deep the therapeutic alliance is.
Yeah.
And, you know, Patricia Clarkson talked about the transpersonal relationship, this kind of spiritual connection, very, very difficult to define, that you have with the client. It's one of those things that we intuitively know when it happens, but very, very difficult to quantify. And the reason it's an advanced skill, it usually is at practice level. And it usually is as the relationship has matured, that, you know, it can happen in early sessions. But I was just thinking of something that happened in my practice recently, and a piece of immediacy I used, and I couldn't have used it very, very early on in the relationship because the relationship wasn't mature enough. A little bit like any relationship we have, you know, we wouldn't be immediate with someone we've just met, maybe, but once we've understood the relationship and understand how they may receive it, I think that's key.
Yes.
Then we can use that particular skill, but it is an advanced skill, and I think, and I'm going to put my neck on the block here, it's probably one of the last skills that students learn.
Yeah, agreed. And it's a tricky skill to practice. It's a tricky skill to practice in a simulated skill session, because it is unlikely to be the right environment to bring up that immediacy. So it is likely that you may start feeling those feelings of immediacy within yourself when you are actually out there in placement with your clients. And then there is the question, what do you do when that comes up for you? Do you dare share it? And I'm going to say, go for it. Go Go and find. What was it? Roger says that towards the end, he was saying, the more I'm fully just myself, the more I'm seeing the movement in my clients. Don't quote me on that, because that is so far away from the actual quote that he said. That's what I took from it. But go for it. Go risk it. Go and risk it and put it out there and see what it does in those relationships. This is a wonderful, magical thing, immediacy. Very difficult to describe. I don't know if we described it adequately here, Rory.
Well, I'm not sure either, Ken. Yeah. That's my immediate reaction. But what you know when it works,
Yes.
When you're with the clients and you use that immediate reaction, you know when it works. And I have a little perceptual filter, so that when this kind of idea comes through, I run it through this very quickly through this filter, and that filter just does a switch saying, is this my stuff or is this connected to the client?
Yes.
So it's connected to our old friend, which we'll look at in another episode. I've looked at in lots of episodes. Transference.
Yeah, we're going to have to rename this the Counselling Tutor Transference podcast, because it does come up in about every episode.